Bronze Age Britain was flourishing in terms of its metalworking culture, and going into the Iron Age especially. It's one of the reasons why Rome came here, because we have so many resources, and we were boasting about our technological and artistic, especially, achievements in shaping things out of rare, or what were rare metals at the time. And so one of these works of art that is stunning is Cloggin Aira Wyddgrug, the Cloak of Wyddgrug. And I'm going to go into that in this video. This is Benjamin, let's jump in. A brief note on the language. Cloggin is the word for cloak in Welsh. You can tell it's masculine because of the YN ending. And Wyddgrug is the town of mold, but of course I think we should just use the Welsh for place names, so I'm going to call it Wyddgrug in this video. Now let's talk about this beautiful work of art. The Mould Gold Cape, or Cloggin Aira Wyddgrug, is a ceremonial cape of solid sheet gold from the northwest of our country, dating somewhere around 1900 to 1600 BCE. I mean, that's 3,500 and more years ago, during the Welsh Bronze Age. But it was not found until 1833 at Bryn Wrexham burial mound near Wyddgrug. It's thought to have formed some kind of a part of a ceremonial dress, perhaps with religious connections. The cape was within the burial mound. This gold cape had been placed on the body of a person who was interred in a rough, stone-lined grave. The remains of the skeleton were fragmentary and the cape was badly crushed. But we get a beautiful display. It was remarkably well preserved. An estimated 200 to 300 amber beads had originally been on the cape, but only a single bead survives. There's also the remains of coarse cloth and 16 fragments of sheet bronze, which seem to have been the backing for the gold. In places the gold was attached to the bronze sheeting with bronze rivets. An urn with large quantities of burnt bone and ash was found nearby. The cape itself is over 450 millimeters wide, meaning a foot and a half. It was fit for someone very slight, maybe even a teenager. It remains unclear which sex this was for, but it seems to be for a woman given the size and grave discovered. The cape shows signs of having been worn. It seems to have had a leather lining. It's one of the most spectacular prehistoric sheet gold working yet discovered from the Bronze Age here. Its form and design are without parallel in Britain. The cape's oval shape would have covered the shoulders, arms, upper chest of the wearer, being higher at the back. It extends so far down the body it would have severely restricted arm movement. And so it wasn't an everyday wear type of thing. It would have been kind of showing off, maybe, showing spiritual power. Maybe even a Bronze Age type of vestment for religious purposes. But fact is, we don't know. One thing that makes this so remarkable is it was beaten out of a single sheet of gold, a work which would have taken a great amount of skill and time, and then decorated with concentric rings and ribs, bosses of repoussé, meaning that you beat it from the inside so that formations form on the outside, decorations. It's astounding. The metal concentric rings mimic folds of cloth. The value of this suggests this was a very wealthy culture. And scholars think that its makers owned a great stretch of the northeast of our country, Wales, and perhaps held sway over a Gogarth, over Llandudno, the mine, the largest copper mine in the northwest of all Europe. A quick note about this area where this cape was found and the people who would have controlled it. Eventually this region produced the tribe the Deciangli or the Deciangli. Now, this probably wouldn't have been exactly the same people, but they would have had some influence on creating the Deciangl, which became Tegangle in medieval Welsh. But this zone, just to the north of Wrexham, it controlled the routes over to Ynys Môn, which for the whole British Isles was a religious focal point of these druidic castes. And if you held on to that, you held the trade as well. And there were valuable mines in Llandudno, or above it, Credydau. And so, to be able to control this region meant anyone who passed through going to these religious centers, you had trade with, and you had the valuable minerals and metals of the north coast. So this was a serious contender for growing a power base, as well as the areas just to the south and east around Maelorn, Shropshire. This is fertile, rich ground for growing crops. It could have sustained a large population. Now, we don't know what kind of organization this had, or if it was any true sense of a state, but to produce this golden cape, they were certainly at minimum a regional power to be reckoned with. The decorative motifs are more advanced than you would expect for the age. Around the neck and base are a line of perforations. Above the perforations are ridges with grooves, with conical bosses that run around the whole cape. And the bosses at the front are enlarged. And there's 3 rows of domed bosses, ridge row of squared base pyramids. The 2 triangle areas on the upper arm are bounded in the front by a ridge. The front and back, it's then bounded by 3 rows of small domes. It's stunning. Perforations along the upper and lower edges may show that it was once attached to lining, perhaps leather, which is decayed away. The bronze strips may have served to strengthen the adornment. Cloggin ar Wyddgrug is similar in some ways to Bronze Age Wessex gold material, though of course it would not have been called Wessex at the time. It clearly would have been an ancestor of Welsh rather than English. This cape shows native British and continental influences. It seems that this was part of a vast trade network and imitating styles coming from Central European sources, Eastern France, and also with the distinctive boss motif surrounded by fine dots, has a long duration in Scotland. And so down here, with its fine repoussé work, the Wyddgrug cape really does show us the last major piece of 2nd millennium sheetwork so far discovered. Thereafter, the preference for sheetwork in the British Isles moves out into more massive gold work in the form of bracelets, twisted torques, and rings. So this is kind of the last great hurrah of a Bronze Age golden era. This gold cape was produced in a golden era. Golden. Whilst small fragments of the cape are on permanent display at Canolfan Daniel Owen in Widdgrug, this has been transported to the British Museum. I mean, that's another issue, but it has had calls for people to bring it back to our country. Though I can understand both arguments. This is in the British Museum, and that has been a controversy. Some have used quite strong language, such as repatriation, repatriating it to Wales. Now I understand fully both arguments. It is Welsh, and as Elvin Llwyd said, it's part of our collective memory. It is. But it's not that simple. We want this object to be used to educate the world about our country, about our culture. And I think that we should really work out some kind of arrangement with the British Museum. Keep it in Wales for a lot of the time, but at the peak of, say, tourist season, it really should be in front of as many people as possible to put Wales on the map. Include the Welsh language in the British Museum in London. Have an arrangement. Let the British Museum lease it. Gain a profit from it being in the British Museum for a month every year. We can use this gold to make more gold for our country whilst sharing it with England. I think that's the best way to go, personally. What do you think? Let me know, did you like looking at a specific object from Celtic history? Because that was quite efficient in terms of my time to be able to make for you, and I hope the quality did not lag for you either. So we could do more of those quite quickly if you do like it. Now, thank you for watching, and diolch yn fawr to my Patreons for supporting the channel. I'm not able to do so much on Patreon at the moment, just trying to get this channel going, but hopefully we'll get there in the future. But for those of you who do contribute, you are helping this channel grow, and I appreciate it. We'll see you in the next.